Young brothers vanished during family hike. That was the headline that made Lucia Ramirez's heart skip a beat as she folded laundry in her small apartment 14 years after her own son disappeared. The familiar weight of grief pressed against her chest as she quickly changed the channel, unable to bear another story about missing children. But nothing could prepare her for the phone call that would come just hours later, the one that would shatter the fragile peace she'd built around her shattered heart. It was Detective Sarah Martinez on the line, her voice carefully measured. "Mrs. Ramirez, we need you to come down to the station. There's been a development in Noah's case." The words hung in the air like smoke, and Lucia felt her legs give way beneath her. After 14 years of silence, of unanswered prayers and sleepless nights, the police were calling about her little boy again. But let's go back to where it all began, to that crisp March evening in 2010, when 7-year-old Noah Ramirez bounced. On his toes in the cramped kitchen of their Eastwood home, his dark eyes bright with anticipation. "Mom, please, I'm old enough." Tommy's mom lets him walk to the store by himself, and he's only 6. Noah's voice carried that particular whine that all children perfect when they want something desperately. Lucia looked up from the dinner dishes, studying her youngest son's earnest face. At 7, Noah was small for his age, with Carlos's stubborn colic and her own determined streak. He stood there in his favorite red jacket, the one with the slightly torn pocket that she kept meaning to sue, clutching 2 crumpled dollar bills like they were treasure. "It's getting dark, Mio," she said, glancing toward the window where the March sun was already painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "It's not that dark. And I know the way perfectly. 3 blocks down Maple Street, turn left at the MV. Blue house, and the store is right there. I could walk it with my eyes closed." Carlos emerged from the living room, newspaper still in hand. "What's all the noise about?" "Noah wants to walk to Eastwood Market alone," Lucia explained, noting how her husband's expression immediately shifted to concern. "Absolutely not," Carlos said firmly. "Not after what happened to that little girl in Henderson last month." "That was Henderson, Dad." "That's like a million miles away," Noah protested, his lower lip jutting out in the pout that usually made his father cave to his requests. 30 miles isn't a million miles, son," Carlos replied, but Lucia could see him wavering. They'd been having this conversation for weeks now. Noah was growing up, and in their tight-knit neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business, where Mrs. Chun always sat on her porch keeping watch, and old Mr. Patterson walked his dog at the same time every evening. It seemed safe enough. The Hendersons let their 8-year-old walk to that market, Lucia said quietly, referring to their neighbors 2 houses down. "And the Kowalski's boy has been doing it since he was 6. Carlos folded his newspaper with more force than necessary. "Those are other people's children, Lucia. This is our boy." But Noah was already sensing victory. He could read his parents' faces like a book, and he knew that his mother's practical nature was warring with her protective instincts. "I promise I'll be super careful. I'll look both ways at every corner. I won't talk to strangers, and I'll come straight home. I just want to buy some sour gummies with my allowance money." The sour gummies were Noah's current obsession. He'd discovered them 3 weeks ago during a family shopping trip, and ever since, he'd been saving every penny of his allowance to buy them. The fact that he'd managed to save $2 whole was a testament to his determination. Noah was usually the type to spend his allowance on the first shiny thing he saw. Lucia looked at her husband, then back at their son. The Eastwood Market had been a fixture in their neighborhood for over 20 years. She'd been shopping there since before Noah was born. And Mr. Patterson, no relation to their neighbor, who owned the store, was a kind man who always gave the kids free stickers with their purchases. The store was well lit, busy enough to feel safe, and the walk was entirely through familiar territory. "Okay," she said finally, and Noah's whoop of joy nearly shattered her eardrums. "But you have to promise me you'll be careful. And you have. To be back before full dark. That gives you 30 minutes. "I promise, Mom. I promise." Noah was already bouncing toward the door, his red jacket bright against the fading light from the hallway. "Wait," Carlos called out, and Noah froze. "You? Take your phone." "Dad, I'm 7. I don't have a phone." "Then you take mine," Carlos said, pulling his old flip phone from his pocket. "You keep it in your jacket pocket, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call us immediately." Noah nodded solemnly, understanding that this was the price of his newfound independence. He carefully tucked the phone into his jacket pocket, the one with the small tear that made a soft rustling sound when he moved. "Straight there and straight back," Lucia said, zipping up his jacket and smoothing down his wild hair. "And remember, if Mr. Patterson isn't there, or if the store seems closed, you come right home. No hanging around." "I know, Mom. I'll be super careful." She watched from the front window as Noah walked down their street, his small figure moving with purpose and excitement. He turned back once to wave, and she waved back, noting how the red jacket made him easy to spot even in the growing dusk. That was the last time she saw her son. The first 15 minutes passed normally. Lucia finished the dishes while Carlos returned to his newspaper, though she noticed he kept glancing toward the window. It was a Thursday evening, and the neighborhood was settling into its usual rhythm. Mrs. Chun was indeed on her porch, and the sound of children playing in the Martinez backyard 2 houses over created a comforting background noise. But as the minutes ticked by, Lucia found herself checking the clock more frequently. 20 minutes. 25. At 30 minutes. Exactly, she was at the window, scanning the street for a small figure in a red jacket. "He's probably just taking his time picking out candy," Carlos said, but she could hear the tension creeping into his voice. "Maybe I should walk down there," Lucia said, grabbing her own jacket. "Give him 5 more minutes. He's probably chatting with Mr. Patterson or one of the other kids." But 5 minutes stretched into 10, and 10 into 15. By the time 45 minutes had passed, both parents were standing on their front porch, scanning the street in both directions. "I'm calling the store," Carlos said, pulling out his landline. ****. The phone rang and rang before Mr. Patterson's tired voice answered. "Eastwood Market. Mr. Patterson, this is Carlos Ramirez. I'm looking for my son, Noah. He should have been in your store about 45 minutes ago. Small boy, red jacket, buying candy?" There was a pause. "I'm sorry, Mr. Ramirez, but I haven't seen any children this evening. Been pretty quiet, actually." "Are you sure he made it here?" Carlos felt his stomach drop. "He left our house 45 minutes ago. He was walking straight to your store." "I've been here the whole time," Mr. Patterson said, his voice growing concerned. "The only customers I've had tonight were Mrs. Kim around 6:30 and a young man buying beer about 20 minutes ago. No children." After hanging up, Carlos and Lucia looked at each other with growing panic. Without another word, they both rushed outside and began walking rapidly toward the market, calling Noah's name. The 3-block walk to Eastwood Market had never felt so long. They checked every yard, every alley, every shadow where a small boy might be hiding or playing. They knocked on doors, asking neighbors if they'd seen Noah. Mrs. Chun confirmed seeing him walk past her house, heading toward the market. The Hendersons hadn't seen him. The Kowalskis were at dinner and hadn't been paying attention to the street dot at the market. Mr. Patterson met them at the door, his weathered face creased with worry. "I've checked the entire store," he said. "Even the back room and the employee areas. He's not here." "But he had to come here," Lucia said, her voice rising with panic. "This is where he was going. This is the only place he ever wanted to go." "Ma'am," I'm telling you, I would have seen him. I've been at the counter all evening, and I can see the whole store from there. No children have been in here tonight." Carlos was already pulling out his phone to call the police, but Lucia found herself studying the store more carefully. Eastwood Market was larger than it appeared from the outside, with several aisles and corners that might not be visible from the front counter. The lighting was dim in places, and she noticed that the back of the store, where the refrigerated section was located, couldn't be seen from where Mr. Patterson stood. "Are you sure you didn't step away from the counter at all?" she asked. "Maybe to help someone in the back, or to use the bathroom?" Mr. Patterson considered this. "Well, I did help Mrs. Kim reach something on a high shelf in the back around 6:30. But that was only for a minute or two." "What time exactly?" Carlos asked, his police training from his younger days kicking in. "Maybe 6:40? She needed help with a jar of pickles on the top shelf near the deli counter. Carlos calculated quickly. If Noah had left their house at 6:30, he would have reached the store right around 6:40. It was possible, just possible, that he'd come into the store while Mr. Patterson was helping Mrs. Kim, and had somehow ... What? Hidden? Left? Been taken? "We need to call the police," Carlos said firmly. "I'll help you search the whole neighborhood," Mr. Patterson offered. "I know every inch of this area." Within an hour, the Eastwood neighborhood was swarming with police officers, volunteers, and concerned neighbors. Detective Raymond Torres, a veteran investigator with 20 years of experience, took charge of the scene. He was a tall, methodical man who approached missing children cases with both urgency and careful attention to detail. "I need to establish a timeline," he told the gathered crowd of volunteers. Noah left his house at approximately 6:30 p.m. Mrs. Chun saw him walking past her house at 6-30-5. The destination was Eastwood Market, which is exactly 3 blocks away. A 7-year-old boy walking at a normal pace should have reached the store by 6:40, 6:45 at the latest. He turned to Mr. Patterson. "You said you were helping Mrs. Kim around 6:40? "Yes, sir. For maybe 2 minutes, helping her reach something in the back of the store." "And you're certain no children entered the store tonight?" "Positive. After Mrs. Kim left, I had one more customer, a young man buying beer. That was around 7:10. Other than that, the store was empty." Detective Torres made notes in his pad. "I'll need to speak with this young man. Do you know him?" "Never seen him before." "Paid cash, didn't say much. Hispanic, maybe early 20s, wearing a baseball cap." "Can you describe the cap?" "Blue, I think. Had some kind of logo on it, but I didn't pay much attention." As the night wore on, the search expanded. Officers went door to door, asking residents if they'd seen Noah or noticed anything unusual. They checked every backyard, every shed, every possible hiding place within a 6-block radius of the market. Search dogs were brought in, following Noah's scent from his house to the market, but the trail seemed to disappear somewhere in the parking lot about by midnight, with no sign of Noah. The investigation officially became a missing child case. Detective Torres gathered the family in the store's back office, a cramped space filled with invoices and inventory sheets. "I need to ask some difficult questions," he said gently. Noah seemed like a responsible boy. "Is there any chance he might have decided to go somewhere else? A friend's house, maybe, or a different store?" "No," Lucia said firmly. "He was obsessed with those sour gummies. He'd been saving money for weeks specifically to buy them from this store. He wouldn't have gone anywhere else. And there's no one he might have gone with? No friends or relatives who might have picked him up?" "Everyone who matters to Noah is here," Carlos said, gesturing toward the crowd of neighbors and relatives who had joined the search. "His whole world is this neighborhood." Detective Torres nodded thoughtfully. "What about the phone?" "You said—" "He had your phone with him?" Carlos's face crumpled slightly. I've been calling it every 10 minutes. It goes straight to voicemail, which means either the phone is turned off, the battery is dead, or it's in an area with no service. Torres sighed. We'll ping the phone company to see if they can trace the last location it was active. As dawn approached, the search took on a more somber tone. Volunteers began to drift away, promising to return later. The police established a command post in the market's parking lot, and Detective Torres briefed the day shift on the case details. We have a 7-year-old boy who disappeared between his house and this store, he told the assembled officers. The timeline is tight, less than 15 minutes. The store owner claims he never saw the boy, but there was a brief window when his attention was elsewhere. We have a possible witness, a young man who bought beer around 7:10, but we haven't located him yet. Officer Maria Santos, newly assigned to the case, raised her hand. What about security cameras? Detective Torres shook his head. That's our biggest problem. The store has cameras, but they're old, and most of them aren't working. The ones that do work only cover the front counter and the main entrance. There's no coverage of the back of the store or the parking lot. What about surrounding businesses? The auto parts store next door closed at 6. The pizza place across the street has cameras, but they only cover their own parking lot. We're checking with them anyway. As the investigation moved into its second day, the media began to take notice. Noah's disappearance made the local news, and his school photo, showing a gap-toothed grin and bright eyes, began appearing on television screens across the city. The attention brought both help and complications. More volunteers joined the search, but the police also had to deal with false sightings, conspiracy theories, and well-meaning but misguided amateur investigators. A tip line was established, and Detective Torres found himself spending hours following up on leads that invariably led nowhere. Someone saw a boy in a red jacket at the mall, Officer Santos reported on the third day, but the security footage shows it was a different child entirely. What about the phone records? Torres asked. The phone company says Noah's phone last pinged a tower at 6:42 p.m. The signal disappeared completely after that. Location? That's the strange part. The ping puts the phone somewhere in the vicinity of the market, but the signal just ... stops, like the phone was turned off or destroyed. Detective Torres studied the map of the area, noting the location of the cell tower and the approximate radius it covered. So Noah made it to the market area, but then something happened to the phone. Or someone happened to the phone, Santos said quietly. By the end of the first week, the investigation had expanded beyond the immediate neighborhood. Police checked with bus stations, airports, and train stations, looking for any sign that Noah had been taken out of the area. They ran background checks on every adult male in the neighborhood, looking for anyone with a criminal history or suspicious behavior. The community response was overwhelming. Neighbors organized search parties, handed out flyers, and set up a fund to help the Ramirez family with expenses. The local chapter of the Guardian Angels began patrolling the neighborhood, and parents started walking their children to school in groups. But as the days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. The police received dozens of tips, but none panned out. Psychics called with visions, none of which proved accurate. The FBI was consulted, but without evidence of kidnapping across state lines. Their involvement was limited. Lucia and Carlos found themselves trapped in a nightmare of uncertainty. They couldn't grieve because they didn't know if Noah was dead. They couldn't hope because they had no reason to believe he was alive. They existed in a horrible limbo, sustained only by the possibility that their son might still be out there, somewhere waiting to be found. The not knowing is the worst part, Lucia confided to her sister Elena, who had moved in to help with the household. If I knew he was dead, I could grieve. If I knew he was alive, I could hope But this is like being suspended in mid-air, never knowing if you're going to fall or be caught. Carlos threw himself into the investigation with an intensity that worried his family. He created elaborate timelines, maps, and theories. He interviewed neighbors himself, sometimes multiple times, looking for details the police might have missed. He spent hours walking the route between their house and the market, timing the walk under different conditions, looking for any clue that might explain what happened to his son. He was carrying $2, Carlos said to Detective Torres during one of their regular updates. A 7-year-old boy with $2. Who would want to hurt a child for $2? I don't think this was about money, Torres replied. If Noah was taken, and I'm not saying he was, it was probably opportunistic. Someone saw a small boy alone and made a split-second decision. But where? Where did it happen? Mrs. Chun saw him walk past her house. The next house is the Hendersons, and they were home. After that, it's just a straight shot to the market. There's that alley between Maple and Oak Streets, Torres said. It's dark, not well lit. Someone could have been waiting there. We've searched that alley 100 times. I know. But if someone was waiting there, they would have taken Noah somewhere else immediately. The alley might have been where it happened, but it wouldn't be where he ended up. The investigation continued for months, but gradually the active search wound down. Detective Torres was assigned to other cases, though he continued to follow up on leads related to Noah's disappearance. The media attention faded, and the neighborhood slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though the missing child posters remained taped to telephone poles and store windows. Lucia found herself unable to work regularly. Every phone call might be news about Noah. Every knock on the door might be him, walking back into their lives as suddenly as he had walked out. She kept his room exactly as it had been, his clothes folded in the dresser, his toys arranged on the shelves. Carlos became increasingly isolated, spending long hours walking the neighborhood, retracing Noah's steps, looking for something, anything that might provide a clue. He developed a theory that Noah had been taken by someone familiar with the area, someone who knew the neighborhood well enough to know when and where to strike. It had to be someone local, he told Detective Torres during one of their meetings. Someone who knew that Noah would be walking alone, someone who knew the timing, someone who knew where to take him without being seen. But we've investigated everyone in the neighborhood, Torres replied. We've run background checks, conducted interviews, looked for anyone with a history of violence or inappropriate behavior with children. We found nothing. Then you missed. Something, Carlos said, his voice tight with frustration. My son didn't just disappear into thin air. Someone took him, and that someone is still out there. As the first anniversary of Noah's disappearance approached, the family held a vigil. In the market parking lot, dozens of neighbors attended, holding candles and sharing memories of the bright little boy who had loved sour gummies and had never met a stranger. The store owner, Mr. Patterson, spoke about how the tragedy had affected the entire community. Noah was the kind of child who made everyone smile, he said. He was curious about everything, always asking questions, always ready with a joke or a story. This neighborhood lost something precious when we lost Noah. But even as the community mourned, the investigation continued. Detective Torres had been promoted to sergeant, but he still kept Noah's file on his desk. New leads continued to trickle in, though none proved fruitful. A construction worker claimed to have seen a man with a child matching Noah's description at a rest stop 3 hours away. A woman in another state reported seeing a boy who looked like Noah at a shopping mall. Each lead was investigated thoroughly, but none led to Noah. I think about him every day, Sergeant Torres told a reporter on the second anniversary of Noah's disappearance. This is the kind of case that haunts an investigator. A child vanishes in broad daylight, in a safe neighborhood on a routine errand. It shouldn't be possible, but it happened. As the years passed, the Ramirez family learned to live with their loss, though they never stopped hoping. Lucia returned to work, though she changed jobs to something that allowed her to work from home. Carlos eventually returned to a more normal schedule, though he continued to walk the neighborhood regularly, always watching, always hoping to spot a familiar face. They moved to a different house after 5 years, unable to bear living in the place where Noah had last been seen. But they stayed in the same neighborhood, unwilling to completely abandon the area where their son had disappeared. The Eastwood market changed hands several times over the years. Mr. Patterson retired, selling the store to a young couple, had dreams of modernizing it. They installed new security cameras, updated the lighting, and reorganized the layout. But the new owners struggled to make the business profitable, and after 2 years, they sold it to a chain that operated it as a discount grocery store. The chain lasted 3 years before closing the store entirely. The building sat empty for months, then was briefly reopened as a convenience store. That business also failed, and by 2020, the former Eastwood market was boarded up and abandoned. Through all these changes, the Ramirez family maintained their routine of walking past the store, hoping against hope that somehow, someway, they might find a clue about what happened to their son. But the building revealed nothing, its empty windows staring back at them like blank eyes. In 2023, a development company purchased the property with plans to demolish the building and construct a small apartment complex. The neighborhood was slowly gentrifying, and the abandoned store was seen as an eyesore that needed to be removed. The demolition was scheduled for early 2024, and despite everything, Lucia found herself feeling emotional about the loss of the building. It was the last connection to Noah's final day, the last place he might have been seen alive. "I know it's silly," she told Elena as they stood across the street from the boarded-up store. "But as long as that building is standing, it feels like there's still hope. Like maybe someday we'll find out what really happened there." "It's not silly," Elena replied. "It's human. We need symbols. We need places to focus our hope and our grief." On January 15th, 2024, the demolition crew arrived at the former Eastwood Market. The building had been vacant for so long that it had become a neighborhood landmark of sorts, a reminder of both happier times and unspeakable tragedy. Workers began the careful process of gutting the interior, removing fixtures and equipment. Before bringing in the heavy machinery, the crew chief, a weathered man named Frank Morrison, who had been in the demolition business for 30 years, always started interior demolition jobs by checking for anything valuable or historically significant. Old buildings sometimes held surprises, antique fixtures, vintage advertising signs, or hidden caches of old coins or bills. "You never know what you'll find when you start tearing down walls," he told his crew. "I once found a collection of baseball cards from the 1950s hidden behind a false wall in an old barbershop, worth more than my truck." The workers began in the front of the store, carefully removing the old checkout counters and display fixtures. The building's interior had been modified several times over the years, with walls added and removed to accommodate different business needs. Some of the walls were clearly newer construction, added during various renovation attempts. It was in the back of the store, in what had once been a storage area, that worker Mike Chun made the discovery that would change everything. "Hey, Frank," he called out, his voice echoing in the empty space. "You need to see this." Frank walked over to where Mike was standing, near a wall that separated the storage area from the main shopping floor. Mike had been removing drywall with a crowbar and had exposed a section of the wall's interior framing. "Look at this," Mike said, pointing to a space between 2 wall studs. "There's something in there." Frank peered into the gap and felt his heart skip a beat. Wedged between the wall studs, covered in dust and debris, was what appeared to be a small piece of red fabric. "Stop everything," Frank said quietly. "Don't touch anything else." He pulled out his phone and called the police. Within an hour, the site was crawling with investigators. Detective Sarah Martinez, who had taken over Noah's case when Sergeant Torres retired, arrived with a team of crime scene technicians. The discovery of what appeared to be a child's clothing in the wall of the store where Noah was last seen was potentially the break the case had been waiting for. "We need to be very careful here," Martinez told the demolition crew. "This could be evidence in a 14-year-old missing person case." The crime scene team carefully extracted the fabric from the wall cavity, using special tools to avoid contaminating any potential evidence. As they worked, the piece of red fabric revealed itself to be a small jacket, a child's jacket with a slightly torn pocket. Lucia Ramirez was in her kitchen, preparing lunch for Carlos, who was working from home, when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer it, not recognizing the number, but something made her pick up. "Mrs. Ramirez? This is Detective Martinez with the police department. I need you to come down to the station as soon as possible. There's been a development in Noah's case." The words hit her like a physical blow. After 14 years of silence, the police were calling about Noah. Her legs gave out, and she found herself sitting on the kitchen floor, the phone still pressed to her ear. "What kind of development?" she managed to ask. "I'd rather discuss it in person, Mom. Can you come in this afternoon? Is he—" She couldn't finish the question. "Please just come in, Mrs. Ramirez, and bring your husband if possible." The drive to the police station felt like it took hours, though it was only 20 minutes. Carlos drove while Lucia sat in the passenger seat, her hands twisted in her lap, her mind racing through every possible scenario. After 14 years of hoping and fearing, of imagining the worst while clinging to the possibility of the best, she wasn't sure she was ready to learn the truth. Detective Martinez met them in the lobby of the police station. She was a woman, in her early 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put people at ease. She had been following Noah's case for years and had always hoped she might be the one to solve it. "Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming in. I know this must be difficult." She led them to a small conference room, where an evidence bag sat on the table. Inside the bag was a small red jacket, faded and dusty, but unmistakably a child's garment. "We found this during the demolition of the old Eastwood market," Martinez said gently. "It was hidden inside a wall in the back storage area. We believe it might be Noah's jacket." Lucia stared at the jacket, her vision blurring with tears. She could see the familiar tear in the pocket, the one she had always meant to repair. The jacket looked smaller than she remembered, somehow fragile and heartbreaking in its plastic evidence bag. "That's it," she whispered. "That's Noah's jacket." "We'll need to do DNA testing to confirm," Martinez said. "But based on your identification and the circumstances, we're treating this as a significant development in the case." "What does this mean?" Carlos asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Does this mean Noah was in the store? Does this mean someone there hurt him?" "We don't know yet," Martinez replied honestly. "What we do know is that Noah's jacket was deliberately hidden inside a wall that was constructed sometime between 2010 and 2015. This suggests that whoever put it there knew about Noah's disappearance and was trying to hide evidence." "But why? Would someone keep the jacket?" Lucia asked. "Why not just throw it away?" "That's one of the questions we need to answer," Martinez said. "Sometimes people keep trophies. Sometimes they keep evidence because they're afraid it might be found elsewhere. Sometimes they hide things in a panic and then can't retrieve them safely." Over the next several days, the police reopened the Noah Ramirez case with renewed energy. The discovery of the jacket had provided the first concrete evidence in 14 years, and Detective Martinez was determined to follow every lead. The first step was to determine exactly when the wall containing the jacket had been constructed. Building permits and renovation records showed that the storage area had been modified in 2011, about a year after Noah's disappearance. The work had been done by a local contractor named Dave Wilson, who had been hired to update the store's layout. "I remember that job," Wilson told Detective Martinez when she interviewed him. "The store owner wanted to create more storage space in the back, so we put up a couple of interior walls to section off an area. Nothing fancy, just basic framing and drywall." "Do you remember who had access to the work area during construction?" "Well, the store was still operating while we worked, so the owner was there every day, and there were usually a few employees around. We tried to work around their schedule, but sometimes they needed to get stuff from the storage area." "What about security? Was the work area ever left unsecured?" "Sure, especially on weekends. We'd lock up our tools, but the store owner had keys to everything. And if I remember right, there were a couple of other people who had keys, maybe. A manager or something." Detective Martinez made careful notes. The timeline was significant. The jacket had been hidden during renovation work that occurred about a year after Noah's disappearance. This suggested that whoever hid the jacket had waited for an opportunity. When the walls were open and accessible, the next step was to interview everyone who had been associated with the store during the 2011 renovation. Mr. Patterson, the original owner, was now in his 70s and living in a retirement community. When Martinez visited him, she found a frail man who was clearly struggling with the news. "I can't believe it," he said, his hands shaking as he held his coffee cup. "That little boy's jacket was hidden in my store all this time, and I never knew. If I had known, if I had found it somehow, Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you some difficult questions," Martinez said gently. "Is there anyone who worked at the store during that time who might have had reason to hurt Noah?" "God, no," Patterson said firmly. "I only had 2 employees, Mrs. Garcia, who worked mornings, and Jimmy Torres, who worked evenings and weekends. Both of them were good people. Mrs. Garcia has grandchildren of her own, and Jimmy was just a kid himself, maybe 19 or 20. What about customers? Anyone who seemed inappropriate around children? Anyone who made you uncomfortable?" Patterson thought for a long moment. "There was one man," he said finally. "I don't know his name, but he used to come in sometimes in the evenings. He always made me a little nervous because he would hang around, not really shopping, just browsing. And he always seemed to be watching when there were children in the store. Can you describe him?" "White man, maybe in his 40s, average height, brown hair. He drove an older sedan, dark blue or black, but I haven't seen him in years. Not since before the store changed hands." Martinez made note of this potential lead, though she knew that after 14 years, tracking down an unnamed customer would be extremely difficult. The investigation expanded to include everyone who had worked at the store between 2010 and 2015. Mrs. Garcia, the morning clerk, had passed away 5 years earlier, but her family provided character references that made it clear she was not a suspect. Jimmy Torres, the evening clerk, was more difficult to locate, but Martinez finally tracked him down in another state, where he was working as a manager at a retail chain. "I remember when that little boy disappeared," Torres told Martinez during a phone interview. "It was all anyone talked about for weeks. The police came and interviewed me several times. Do you remember anything unusual about that evening? Any customers who seemed suspicious?" "Not really. It was a quiet night, as I recall. Mr. Patterson was there, and I think we had a few regular customers. Nothing stood out." "What about during the renovation in 2011?" Do you remember anyone having unusual access to the construction area? Torres was quiet for a moment. You know, there was something strange about that time. Mr. Patterson seemed really nervous during the renovation. Like he was worried about something. And there was one day when I came in and found him in the back area where the construction was happening, even though we weren't supposed to go back there without the contractor. Did you ask him about it? I did, and he said he was just checking on the work. But he seemed really flustered, like I had caught him doing something he shouldn't have been doing. This conversation prompted Martinez to take another hard look at Mr. Patterson himself. She reviewed his original statements from 2010, looking for any inconsistencies or red flags that might have been missed in his original statement. Patterson had said he was at the counter all evening and had never seen Noah enter the store. But he had also admitted to helping Mrs. Kim reach something on a high shelf around 6:40 p.m., which was exactly when Noah would have arrived at the store. Martinez decided to interview Mrs. Kim again, though she was now in her 80s and her memory was not as sharp as it had been 14 years earlier. I remember that evening because it was so sad, Mrs. Kim said when Martinez visited her. That poor little boy disappearing like that. I was probably one of the last people to see him. What do you mean, one of the last people to see him? Well, I saw him walking toward the store as I was leaving. He was in that red jacket, bouncing along like children do. Such a sweet boy. Detective Martinez felt her pulse quicken. Mrs. Kim, are you saying you saw Noah outside the store that evening? Yes, dear. I was walking to my car when I saw him coming down the sidewalk. He waved at me, such a polite child. I got in my car and drove away, but I saw him go into the store in my rearview mirror. You saw him go into the store? Oh, yes, definitely. He opened the door and went inside. I remember thinking how grown-up he looked, shopping by himself. Martinez felt a chill run down her spine. Mrs. Kim's statement directly contradicted what Mr. Patterson had told police 14 years ago. According to Patterson, Noah had never entered the store, but Mrs. Kim was saying she saw him go inside. Mrs. Kim, are you absolutely certain about this? This is very important. Well, my memory isn't what it used to be, the elderly woman said uncertainly. But I'm pretty sure I saw him go into the store. Why? Is something wrong? Martinez spent the next hour carefully going through the timeline with Mrs. Kim, trying to determine if her memory was accurate or if she was confusing details from different days. But Mrs. Kim remained consistent in her recollection. She had seen Noah enter the Eastwood market on the evening he disappeared. This revelation changed everything. If Mrs. Kim was correct, then Noah had made it to the store, and Mr. Patterson had lied about never seeing him. But why would Patterson lie? And what had happened to Noah inside the store? Martinez immediately drove to the retirement community to confront Patterson with this new information. She found him in his room, staring out the window at the parking lot. Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you again about the evening Noah disappeared. I have a witness who says she saw Noah enter your store that night. Patterson's face went pale. That's impossible. I told you, I never saw that boy. Mrs. Kim says she saw him go into the store around 6:40. She was leaving as he was arriving, and she saw him walk through the front door. Mrs. Kim is old. Her memory isn't reliable. Mr. Patterson, I need you to tell me the truth. Did Noah Ramirez enter your store that night? Patterson was quiet for a long moment, his hands trembling slightly. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I need to call my lawyer. The admission that Patterson wanted a lawyer was as good as a confession that he had been lying. Martinez immediately called for backup and formally arrested Patterson on charges of obstruction of justice and providing false information to police. But she knew that these charges were just the beginning. If Patterson had lied about seeing Noah, there was likely much more to the story. at the police station. Patterson's lawyer advised him to remain silent, but after several hours of consultation, Patterson decided to make a statement. What he revealed would finally solve the mystery of Noah Ramirez's disappearance, but it would also devastate everyone who had known and trusted him. Noah did come into the store that night, Patterson said, his voice breaking. I lied because I was scared. I was scared of what people would think, what would happen to me. What happened when Noah came into the store? Martinez asked. He came in around 6:40, just like you said. He was so excited, talking about buying candy with his allowance money. He went straight to the candy aisle, and I could hear him, talking to himself, trying to decide what to buy. And then what happened? Patterson's face crumpled. I was helping Mrs. Kim when he came in, and after she left, I went back to the counter. Noah was still in the candy aisle, and I could see him counting his money. He was so focused, so innocent. And I had been drinking that day. I had been drinking a lot that day. Mr. Patterson, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. I called out to him, asked if he needed help finding anything. He came up to the counter with a bag of those sour gummies he loved so much. He put his $2 on the counter and smiled at me with that gap-toothed grin. And I don't know what came over me. I reached out and touched his face, and he pulled away, looking scared. Martinez felt sick to her stomach, but she kept her expression neutral. What happened next? He tried to leave, but I grabbed his arm. I told him he couldn't tell anyone what had happened, that it would be our secret. But he was crying, saying he wanted to go home. I panicked. I didn't mean to hurt him, but I was holding on to his arm too tight, and he was struggling to get away. Mr. Patterson, where is Noah now? I don't know, Patterson said, tears streaming down his face. I swear to God, I don't know. He broke free from me and ran toward the back of the store. I followed him, trying to calm him down, trying to explain that I hadn't meant to scare him. But he was so frightened, and he was running and crying. Did you catch him? He tripped. He was running past the dairy coolers, and he tripped over a box of merchandise that was sitting on the floor. He hit his head on the corner of the cooler, and he stopped moving. The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Martinez felt her heart breaking for the Ramirez family, for Noah, for everyone who had spent 14 years wondering what had happened to an innocent little boy. What did you do then? I checked his pulse, tried to wake him up, but he was gone. I killed him. I killed that sweet little boy because I couldn't control myself. Where is Noah's body, Mr. Patterson? I buried him, Patterson said quietly. I closed the store early that night and buried him in the woods behind the industrial park. I know it was wrong, but I was scared. I was scared of going to prison, scared of what people would think. I made a terrible mistake, and then I made it worse by covering it up. What about the jacket? I kept it. I don't know why, but I kept it. When the renovations started the next year, I hid it in the wall during construction. I thought it would be safe there, that no one would ever find it. The confession provided answers that the Ramirez family had been seeking for 14 years. But those answers brought no comfort. Their worst fears had been confirmed. Noah was dead, killed by someone they had trusted, someone who had been part of their community for years. The police immediately organized a search of the wooded area behind the industrial park, using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. After 2 days of searching, they found Noah's remains buried in a shallow grave, exactly where Patterson had said they would be. The discovery of Noah's body was devastating for the family, but it also provided a sense of closure that they had been unable to find for 14 years. They could finally grieve properly, finally lay their son to rest. The news of Patterson's arrest and confession sent shockwaves through the Eastwood neighborhood. Residents who had known and trusted him For years struggled to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the monster who had killed a child. "I shopped in that store hundreds of times," said neighbor Jennifer Martinez, no relation to the detective. "I brought my own children in there. To think that he was capable of something like this, it makes me sick." The trial was mercifully brief. Patterson's lawyer advised him to plead guilty to charges of involuntary manslaughter, child abuse, and obstruction of justice. At 73 years old, Patterson was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Though his health was already failing, and many doubted he would survive his sentence. During the sentencing hearing, Lucia Ramirez was allowed to give a victim impact statement. She stood at the podium, looking directly at the man who had taken her son from her, and spoke with a dignity that impressed everyone in the courtroom. "You stole 14 years from our family," she said. 14 years of not knowing, of hoping, of imagining the worst while clinging to the possibility of the best. You stole Noah's childhood, his teenage years, his future. You stole our chance to watch him grow up, to see him graduate, to see him fall in love and start a family of his own." She paused, wiping away tears. "But you didn't steal our love for him. You didn't steal our memories of the 7 years we had with him. And you didn't steal our ability to forgive, because that's what Noah would have wanted. He was a child who loved everyone, who trusted everyone, who saw the good in people. He wouldn't want us to carry hatred in our hearts." The courtroom was silent as she concluded her statement. "I forgive you, Mr. Patterson, not because you deserve forgiveness, but because Noah deserves to be remembered with love, not hatred." After the trial, the Ramirez family held a proper funeral for Noah. The entire neighborhood attended, as did many of the police officers who had worked on the case over the years. Detective Martinez gave a eulogy that spoke of Noah's impact on everyone who had known him, even in his brief life. Noah Ramirez was 7 years old when he died, she said. But in those 7 years, he touched the lives of everyone in this community. He was the kind of child who made adults remember what it felt like to see the world through young eyes, full of wonder and possibility. The funeral was followed by the establishment of the Noah Ramirez Foundation, an organization dedicated to child safety and supporting families of missing children. The foundation's first initiative was to provide security camera systems to small businesses in underserved communities, helping to prevent future tragedies. "We can't bring Noah back," Carlos said at the foundation's launch event, "but we can honor his memory by working to protect other children, by making sure that no other family has to go through what we went through." The former Eastwood market was never rebuilt. Instead, the lot was converted into a small park with a playground and a memorial garden dedicated to Noah's memory. The park became a gathering place for the community, a place where children could play safely while their parents watched from nearby benches. On the memorial stone in the center of the garden, a simple inscription read, "In memory of Noah Ramirez, who loved sour gummies and saw the good in everyone. His light continues to shine in the hearts of all who knew him." Detective Martinez kept Noah's case file on her desk for the rest of her career, not because the case was unsolved, but because it reminded her of why she had become a police officer. On the anniversary of Noah's disappearance each year, she would visit the memorial garden and leave a small bag of sour gummies at the base of the memorial stone. "I never met Noah," she would tell new officers who asked about the case, "but he taught me something important about this job. Every victim matters. Every case matters. Every family deserves answers, no matter how long it takes to find them." The case had a profound impact on the entire police department, leading to changes in how missing child cases were investigated. New protocols were established for interviewing witnesses, reviewing security footage, and following up on seemingly routine locations. The lesson learned from Noah's case was clear. Sometimes the most obvious answer is the correct one, and sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones we should trust the least. For the Ramirez family, the resolution of Noah's case brought both closure and new challenges. They had spent 14 years living with uncertainty, and now they had to learn how to live with certainty. The truth was painful, but it was also liberating. They could finally stop wondering, stop hoping, stop imagining. People ask me if I'm glad we finally know the truth, Lucia said in an interview 1 year after the trial. And the answer is yes, I am glad. The not knowing was eating us alive. At least now we can grieve properly. We can remember Noah properly, and we can move forward with our lives. Carlos found purpose in his work with the foundation, traveling to speak with other families of missing children, sharing his experience and offering support. The worst thing about having a missing child is the isolation, he would tell them. You feel like you're the only people in the world going through this nightmare. But you're not alone. There are others who understand, others who care, others who want to help. The community of Eastwood was forever changed by Noah's disappearance and the eventual discovery of what had happened to him. Neighbors became more vigilant, more protective of their children, more aware of the potential dangers that could lurk in seemingly safe places. But they also became more connected, more supportive of each other, more determined to create a community where children could grow up safely. The annual Noah Ramirez Memorial Walk became a tradition, with hundreds of participants walking the route from the Ramirez family's former home to the memorial garden. The walk served multiple purposes. It raised money for the foundation. It honored Noah's memory, and it reminded the community that they were stronger together than apart. As the years passed, Noah's story became part of the neighborhood's history, passed down from older residents to newer ones, from parents to children. The little boy who had disappeared on his way to buy candy became a symbol of innocence lost, but also of a community's resilience and determination to protect its most vulnerable members. The memorial garden grew over the years, with new plantings and additions funded by donations from visitors and community members. A small library was added, filled with children's books that were available for anyone to borrow. Benches were placed throughout the garden, creating quiet spaces for reflection and remembrance. On warm summer evenings, the garden would fill with families, children playing on the playground while their parents sat on the benches, watching carefully but allowing their children the freedom to be children. It was exactly what Noah would have wanted, a place where children could laugh and play and dream about the future, protected by a community that had learned from tragedy but refused to be defined by it. The case of Noah Ramirez became a textbook, example in police academies across the country, studied by future detectives who would learn about the importance of thorough investigation, the dangers of assumption, and the power of persistence. Detective Martinez was frequently invited to speak at law enforcement conferences, where she would tell Noah's story and emphasize the lessons it taught. Every case teaches us something, she would say, but some cases teach us more than others. Noah's case taught me that the truth is often hiding in plain sight, that the people we trust the most can sometimes be the most dangerous, and that families deserve answers, no matter how long it takes to find them. The red jacket that had been hidden in the wall for so many years became a powerful symbol of the case, displayed in a frame in the police station's lobby alongside a photo of Noah and information about the foundation established in his memory. Visitors to the station would often stop to read the display, reminded of the importance of the work being done by the officers who served their community. For Detective Martinez, Noah's case became the defining moment of her career. She went on to solve many other cases, to help many other families, but she never forgot the little boy who had disappeared on his way to buy candy, or the family who had waited 14 years for answers. Noah changed my life, she said in her retirement speech. He reminded me that this job isn't about statistics or clearance rates or commendations. It's about people. It's about families. It's about justice. And sometimes it's about making sure that a little boy who loved sour gummies and saw the good in everyone is never forgotten. The story of Noah Ramirez ended with tragedy, but it also ended with hope. Hope that justice could prevail, even after 14 years. Hope that communities could heal from even the most devastating losses. Hope that the memory of one small boy could inspire others to protect the children in their own communities. As the sun set over the memorial garden on the 10th anniversary of Noah's funeral, families gathered as they did every year to remember the boy who had brought them together in grief, but had ultimately united them in purpose. Children played on the playground while their parents watched from the benches, creating new memories in a place dedicated to preserving old ones. The inscription on the memorial stone caught the last rays of sunlight. In memory of Noah Ramirez, who loved sour gummies and saw the good in everyone. His light continues to shine in the hearts of all who knew him. And in the growing dusk, with the sound of children's laughter echoing across the garden, it seemed as if that light would never fade, that the memory of one small boy would continue to inspire kindness, vigilance, and hope for generations to come. The case was closed. The truth was known, and justice had been served. But Noah's story would continue forever, told and retold, remembered and honored, a reminder that every child matters, every family deserves answers, and every community has the power to turn tragedy into triumph, loss into love, and darkness into light. In the end, that may have been Noah's greatest gift to the world, not just the 7 years he lived, but the countless lives he touched through his story, the families he helped through his foundation, and the community he inspired through his memory. The little boy who had disappeared on his way to buy candy had become something much larger, a symbol of hope, a catalyst for change, and a reminder that love can triumph over even the darkest circumstances. His red jacket, once hidden behind a wall, now stood as a testament to the power of truth, the importance of persistence, and the unbreakable bonds of family and community. And in the memorial garden that bore his name, children continued to play and dream and hope, protected by a community that had learned from loss but refused to be defeated by it. The story of Noah Ramirez was finally complete, but his legacy would continue forever, written not in the pages of a police report or the transcripts of a trial, but in the lives of the people who remembered him, the children who played in the garden dedicated to his memory, and the community that had been forever changed by one small boy's brief but powerful presence in the world.